The apartment smelled like burnt toast and cheap coffee, the kind of scent that clings to your clothes and reminds you of late nights and early mornings. I'd been living with Douglas for 3 months now, ever since my lease ran out and I answered his Craigslist ad for a roommate. Quiet, tidy, no pets, it said. Seemed simple enough. I didn't expect much, just a place to crash, a roof over my head while I figured out my next move. But life has a way of sneaking up on you, like a shadow you don't notice until it's right behind you. Douglas was hard to pin down. 32, 6 years older than me, with a lanky frame that made him look taller than he was. His hair was a mess of dark curls, always falling into his eyes, which were this deep hazel that seemed to shift depending on the light. He was a graphic designer, worked from home most days, his desk cluttered with sketch pads and empty energy drink cans. He had this quiet intensity about him, like he was always thinking 3 steps ahead of whatever he was saying, but he wasn't cold. No, he'd smile at my dumb jokes, leave me half his pizza when he ordered takeout, or hum some random indie song while doing dishes, little things that made the apartment feel less like a temporary stop and more like something else. His all that night, though, everything shifted. It was a Thursday, sticky and warm, the kind of late summer evening where the air feels heavy in your lungs. I'd been out with coworkers, nursing a couple of beers at a dive bar, trying to shake off a long week. My job at the marketing firm was fine, but it drained me. Endless meetings, clients who thought they knew better, deadlines that loomed like storm clouds. By the time I got home, it was past 11, and my head was fuzzy, not from the alcohol but from the weight of another day blurring into the next. The apartment was dark except for a faint glow spilling from Douglas's room. His door was ajar, maybe an inch or two, enough to let a sliver of light cut across the hardwood floor. I figured he was working late again, hunched over his tablet, lost in some design project. I kicked off my shoes, tossed my keys on the counter, and headed toward my room, which was just past his. The floor creaked under my socks, and I winced, hoping I wouldn't disturb him. But as I got closer, I heard something, a low, rhythmic sound, almost like a sigh. My steps slowed, curiosity tugged at me, sharper than it should have been. I don't know why I didn't just keep walking. Maybe it was the beers, loosening my sense of boundaries. Maybe it was the way the light from his room seemed to pull me in, soft and warm, like a candle in a window. I glanced through the crack in the door, not meaning to linger, but my eyes caught on him, and I froze. Douglas was on his bed, shirtless, his jeans unbuttoned, one hand moving slowly, deliberately. The glow from his laptop cast shadows across his chest, highlighting the lean lines of his body. His eyes were half closed, lips parted, and there was this raw, unguarded look on his face that hit me like a punch. I'd seen him tired, stressed, laughing over a bad movie, but never like this, vulnerable, human, caught in a moment that was supposed to be private. My breath hitched, and I knew I should have backed away, should have bolted to my room and pretended I'd seen nothing. But then his eyes flicked up, meeting mine through the gap in the door. Time stopped. My heart slammed against my ribs, and I braced for him to yell, to slam the door, to call me out for being a creep. But he didn't. He just looked at me. His hand paused, but he didn't cover himself, didn't flinch. His gaze held mine, steady, unreadable, and something in it pinned me in place. It wasn't anger or embarrassment. It was something else, an invitation, a question. I couldn't tell. I couldn't tell. Ah, sorry, I stammered, my voice cracking like I was 16 again. I took a step back, my face burning. I'm just... It's fine, Nate, he said, his voice low, almost too calm. He shifted slightly, sitting up a bit, but he didn't close the door or pull the blanket over himself. You don't have to go. I blinked, my brain scrambling to process his words. What? He tilted his head, a faint smile tugging at his lips, but it wasn't mocking. It was soft, almost curious. You heard me. I stood there, rooted to the spot, my pulse racing. The air felt thicker, charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. I didn't know what to do, what to say. Part of me wanted to laugh it off, make some awkward joke and retreat to my room. But another part, the part that had noticed the way his fingers lingered on my arm when he passed me a beer, the way his laugh made my chest tighten, was screaming to stay. I rubbed the back of my neck, my mouth dry. I should probably... Only if you want to, he cut in, his voice still steady, but there was a flicker of something in his eyes now. Uncertainty, maybe. Like he was testing the water, waiting to see if I'd dive in or pull back. Waiting to see if I'd dive in or pull back. waiting to see if I'd dive in or pull back, waiting to see if I'd dive in or pull back, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive in or pull back, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I'd dive into the place, waiting to see if I don't know what possessed me. Maybe it was the way he was looking at me, like he saw more than just the guy who paid half the rent. Maybe it was the loneliness that had been gnawing at me for months, the ache of wanting something I couldn't name. I pushed the door open a little wider, my hand shaking, and stepped inside. His room was a mess, clothes draped over a chair, books stacked haphazardly on the nightstand, a half-empty coffee mug on the floor. The laptop was still open, paused on some video I didn't glance at long enough to identify. Douglas leaned back against the headboard, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp, watching me like I was a puzzle he was trying to solve. "You sure about this?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. I didn't even know what this was, but the question felt necessary, like a lifeline. He didn't answer right away. Instead, he swung his legs over the side of the bed and stood, closing the distance between us in a few steps. He was taller than me by an inch or two, and up close, I could see the faint stubble on his jaw, the way his chest rose and fell with each breath. He smelled like cedar and something faintly sweet, maybe his shampoo. "I'm sure," he said, and there was no hesitation in his voice now. He reached out, his fingers brushing my arm, light enough that I could have pulled away if I wanted to. I didn't. What happened next wasn't a blur, but it wasn't clear either. It was like stepping into a dream, where everything feels heightened and unreal but so vivid you can't look away. His hand slid to my waist, pulling me closer, and I let him. My hands found his shoulders, hesitant at first, then firmer, like I was anchoring myself. His lips brushed mine, soft and tentative, and I tasted salt and warmth. It wasn't rushed or desperate, it was careful, like we were both afraid of breaking something fragile. We didn't talk much after that. Words felt clumsy, inadequate. We ended up on his bed, clothes half on, half off, exploring each other with a kind of quiet reverence. It wasn't about lust, not entirely. It was about connection, about finding something in the other person that you didn't even know you were looking for. His fingers traced the scar on my collarbone from a bike accident when I was 12, and I shivered, not from the touch but from the way he looked at it, like it was part of a story he wanted to know. Afterward, we lay there, tangled in the sheets, the laptop's glow the only light in the room. My head was on his chest, his heart beat steady under my ear. Neither of us spoke for a long time. I kept waiting for the awkwardness to creep in, for one of us to crack a joke or make an excuse to leave. But it didn't come. Instead, there was this quiet calm, like we'd crossed some invisible line and found something worth staying for. "You okay?" he asked finally, his voice rumbling through his chest. "Yeah," I said, and I meant it. "You?" He let out a soft laugh, his fingers brushing through my hair. "Better than I thought I'd be." Plonk. I propped myself up on my elbow, looking at him. His face was softer now, the guarded edge gone. "What's that supposed to mean?" He shrugged, but his smile was real, not the half-smirk he usually wore. "Didn't plan on this, that's all, but I'm not complaining." I wanted to ask more, how long he'd felt this way, if he'd meant to leave the door open, what this meant for us now, but I didn't. Not because I was afraid of the answers, but because, for once, I didn't need them. The moment was enough. The next morning, I woke up in his bed, the sheets cool where he'd been. I could hear him in the kitchen, the clink of a coffee mug, the soft hum of that same indie song. I lay there for a minute, staring at the ceiling, trying to make sense of the warmth spreading through my chest. It wasn't just about last night. It was about Douglas, his quiet kindness, his sharp wit, the way he made the apartment feel like a place I could belong. I got up, pulled on my shirt, and headed to the kitchen. He was at the counter, pouring coffee, his hair still a mess. He glanced up, and for a second, I thought he might look away, like last night was a mistake. But he didn't. He just smiled, small and real, and handed me a mug. "Sleep okay?" he asked. like it was any other morning. We're darling. Better than I thought I would, I said, echoing his words from last night. He laughed, and something in me settled, like a knot I hadn't noticed was there. We didn't talk about what happened, not yet, but we didn't need to. The door was open now, and neither of us was walking away. The days after that were different. Not in a dramatic way, but in the small stuff. The way our hands brushed when we passed the salt at dinner. The way he'd linger in the living room after a movie, like he didn't want the night to end. The way I caught myself watching him sketch, his brow furrowed, his pencil moving like it had a mind of its own. It was new, fragile, but it was ours. Work kept me busy, but my mind was always half here, half with him. I'd catch myself smiling at random moments, like when I remembered the way he'd teased me about my terrible taste in beer. My coworkers noticed, asked if I'd met someone. I just shrugged, not ready to put words to it. Not because I was ashamed, but because it felt too big, too real to sum up in a casual conversation. Douglas, though he was careful, not distant, but cautious, like he was waiting for me to set the pace. He didn't push, didn't ask for more than I was ready to give, but I could feel it, the way his eyes lingered, the way his voice softened when he said my name. It scared me, not because I didn't want it, but because I did, more than I'd wanted anything in a long time. One night, maybe a week later, we were on the couch, some dumb reality show on in the background. My feet were in his lap, and he was absently tracing circles on my ankle with his thumb. It was so normal, so easy, that it almost hurt. I looked at him, his profile lit by the TV's glow, and something in me cracked open. "Hey," I said, my voice quieter than I meant it to be. He turned, his thumb stilling. "Yeah?" I didn't know what I wanted to say. Not exactly. But I needed him to know this wasn't just a fluke, not just a moment we'd stumbled into. I'm glad I didn't walk away that night. His eyes searched mine, and for a second I thought I'd said too much, but then he smiled, that soft, real smile that made my chest ache. "Me too, Nate. Me too." We didn't say more, didn't need to. The show droned on, the city hummed outside, and we sat there, his hand on my ankle, my heart a little less heavy than it had been before. The door was open, and for the first time in a long time, I wasn't afraid of what was on the other side. The weeks after that night felt like walking on a tightrope. Not because things were bad with Douglas, God, no. If anything, they were too good, and that's what scared me. Every morning, I'd wake up to the smell of his coffee, the sound of him humming in the kitchen, and this quiet warmth would settle in my chest. But then I'd remember how new this was, how fragile, and my stomach would twist with the fear of screwing it up. I wasn't used to wanting something this much, and the weight of it pressed against me like a bruise. Douglas was steady, that's the best word for it. He didn't push for grand gestures or big conversations about what we were. He just let things unfold, like he trusted the universe to figure it out. We'd cook dinner together, bumping shoulders in our tiny kitchen, or sit on the couch with my legs across his, watching movies neither of us cared about. His hand would rest on my knee, casual but deliberate, and I'd feel this spark, like a match-catching flame. But underneath it, there was always this question in my head. What happens next? I didn't have a roadmap for this. I'd dated before guys, girls, nothing serious. Quick flings, a few months here and there, always fizzling out before they could mean anything. I'd never been in love, not really. Lust, sure. Infatuation, plenty of times. But this thing with Douglas, it was different. It wasn't just the way he kissed me, slow and careful, like he was memorizing every second. It was the way he'd leave a post-it on the fridge, with a doodle of a grumpy cat, when he knew I'd had a rough day. The way he'd listen when I rambled about work, his eyes locked on mine, like he actually cared about my boring stories. It was the way he made me feel seen, not just as Nate, the guy who paid half the rent, but as someone worth knowing. But trust, that was harder. Not because I thought he'd hurt me, but because I wasn't sure I trusted myself not to mess this up. I'd always been good at keeping people at arm's length. Safer that way, less chance of getting hurt. But with Douglas, the walls I'd built didn't seem to work. He'd slip past them without even trying, and it left me raw, exposed in a way I wasn't used to. One evening, about a month after that first night, we were sprawled on the living room floor, surrounded by takeout containers. The apartment smelled like soy sauce and sesame oil, and the TV was on low, some nature documentary about whales droning in the background. Douglas was sketching in his notebook, his pencil scratching softly, while I scrolled through my phone, half reading work emails. It was one of those moments that felt so normal it almost hurt, like we'd been doing this forever. "Hey," I said, setting my phone down. "You ever think about, I don't know, what this is?" He didn't look up right away, his pencil still moving. "This?" I gestured vaguely between us, my face warming. "Yeah, you and me, what we're doing, what we're doing." His hand paused, and he glanced at me, his hazel eyes catching the lamplight. "You mean like labeling it?" "Maybe." I shrugged, trying to play it cool, but my voice betrayed me, coming out softer than I meant. I don't know what you want out of this." He set his sketchbook down, leaning back on his hands. His shirt rode up slightly, showing a sliver of his stomach, and I had to force myself to focus on his face. "What I want," he said slowly, like he was choosing each word, "is to keep doing this, with you, whatever it looks like." I frowned, not because I didn't like his answer, but because it felt too easy. "That's it? Just keep going?" He tilted his head, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You want more than that?" "I don't know." I rubbed my hands on my jeans, suddenly aware of how sweaty my palms were. I've never done this before. Not like this. And I don't want to screw it up. Not like this. And I don't want to screw it up." His smile faded, but not in a bad way. His eyes softened, and he leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Nate, you're not going to screw it up. Not unless you're planning to, like, set the apartment on fire or something." I laughed, but it was shaky. "I'm serious. Man, I'm not good at this. Relationships, feelings, whatever you call it. I don't know how to do it right." He didn't say anything for a moment, just looked at me, his gaze steady but not heavy. Then he reached out, his fingers brushing mine, light and warm. "You don't have to be good at it. You just have to be here." That should have been enough, but it wasn't. Not quite. Because the thing was, I was here, more than I'd ever been with anyone, and that's what scared me. The more I let myself feel, the more I had to lose. Work didn't help. The marketing firm was a pressure cooker, with deadlines piling up and a new client who changed their mind every 5 minutes. I'd come home drained, my head buzzing with stress, and Douglas would be there, steady as ever, offering me a beer or a quiet smile. But the more he gave, the more I felt like I was falling behind, like I wasn't holding up my end of whatever this was. One night, I got home late, my tie loosened and my shirt wrinkled from a day that felt like it would never end. Douglas was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables for some stir-fry he was throwing together. The apartment smelled like garlic and ginger, and the radio was playing some soft jazz track that made the room feel warmer than it was. "Rough day?" he asked, glancing over his shoulder. I dropped my bag by the door and slumped onto a stool at the counter. "Yeah, clients being a nightmare. Wants a whole campaign redone by Monday." He winced, tossing some peppers into the pan. They sizzled, filling the air with a sharp, savory scent. "That sucks. You want to talk about it?" "Not really." I rubbed my eyes, feeling the weight of the day pressing down. "Just want to forget it for a while." He nodded, like he got it, and went back to cooking. That was one of the things I loved about him. He didn't push when I wasn't ready to talk. But tonight, that quiet understanding felt like a spotlight, exposing all the ways I wasn't measuring up. I watched him move, his hands quick and sure, his curls falling into his eyes, and something in me twisted. "Why are you so okay with this?" I blurted out, the words spilling before I could stop them. He turned, the knife still in his hand, his brow furrowed. "Okay with what?" "This. Us. Me being, I don't know, a mess half the time." I gestured at myself, my voice sharper than I meant. "You're just fine, like it's all so easy for you." He set the knife down, wiping his hands on a dish towel. "It's not easy," he said quietly. "I'm just not freaking out about it." "Why not?" I leaned forward, my elbows on the counter. "I mean, come on, Douglas. We're roommates. This whole thing started because I walked in on you, and now we're, what? Dating? Hooking up? I don't even know what to call it, and you're just standing there like it's no big deal." He crossed his arms, leaning against the counter, his eyes searching mine. "It's a big deal, Nate. I'm not pretending it's not, but I'm not going to sit here and overthink it to death either. I like you. I like this. That's enough for me right now." I opened my mouth, then closed it, not sure what to say. His words were simple, but they hit hard, like a stone dropped in still water. I wanted to believe it could be that easy, but my brain kept spinning, picking at every doubt, every what if. "What if it's not enough?" I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. What if I mess this up? What if you wake up one day and realize I'm not worth the trouble? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he stepped around the counter, so close I could feel the warmth of him, the faint scent of his cologne mixing with the garlic in the air. He reached out, his hand cupping my face, his thumb brushing my cheek. It was such a small gesture, but it felt like he was holding me together. "You're worth it," he said, his voice low and firm. "And I'm not going anywhere unless you tell me to." I swallowed hard, my throat tight. I wanted to argue, to tell him he was wrong, that I wasn't worth the risk. But the way he looked at me, like he saw every crack and still wanted to stay, made the words stick in my chest. He kissed me then, soft and slow, and I let myself sink into it, let the doubts fade for a moment. His hand slid to my waist, pulling me closer, and I gripped his shirt, needing something to hold on to. It wasn't a fix, not a solution to the mess in my head, but it was enough to keep me grounded, at least for now. The next few weeks were a dance of sorts, 2 steps forward, 1 step back. We'd have these moments of closeness, like when he'd pull me into a hug after a long day, or when we'd stay up late talking about nothing and everything. But then I'd pull back, spooked by how much I was starting to need him. I'd catch myself watching him too closely, memorizing the way his hands moved when he sketched, or the way his laugh sounded when I said something dumb. It was too much, too fast, and I didn't know how to handle it. One Saturday, we went for a walk in the park near our place. It was one of those crisp fall days, the air sharp with the smell of leaves and damp earth. Douglas had his camera slung around his neck, snapping photos of random things, a kid chasing a pigeon, a tree with half its leaves gone. I teased him about it, calling him a wannabe hipster, and he just grinned, aiming the camera at me. "Smile, Nate," he said, peering through the lens. I rolled my eyes but gave him a half smile, feeling self-conscious. "You're gonna fill up your memory card with pictures of me looking annoyed." "Nah," he said, lowering the camera. "You look good annoyed." I laughed, shoving his shoulder, and he caught my hand, lacing his fingers through mine. It was the first time we'd done that in public, and my heart stuttered, not because I was ashamed, but because it felt so real. A few people glanced our way, but nobody stared, nobody cared. It was just us, walking hand in hand, the world moving around us like it always did. We ended up at a coffee shop, tucked into a corner booth with mismatched mugs and a plate of half-eaten scones. Douglas was flipping through his camera, showing me the shots he'd taken. Most of them were of me, candid moments, my head turned, my eyes squinting against the sun. I didn't know he'd been watching me that closely. "You're creepy," I said, but there was no heat in it. He smirked, leaning back in his chair. "You're just photogenic." I snorted, but my chest felt warm, like I'd swallowed the sun. "You're full of it. Maybe." He reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine. "But I mean it. I mean it." That night, back at the apartment, we didn't turn on the TV or pull out our laptops. We just sat on the couch, my head on his shoulder, his arm around me. The city hummed outside, but in here, it was quiet, just the sound of our breathing and the occasional creak of the radiator. I wanted to freeze that moment, to keep it safe from the doubts that kept creeping in. "I'm scared," I admitted, my voice muffled against his shirt. He didn't ask of what. He just tightened his arm around me, his lips brushing my forehead. "I know, but we're okay, Nate. We're okay." I wanted to believe him. God, I wanted to, but trust was a shadow, always shifting, always just out of reach, and I wasn't sure if I could catch it before it slipped away. Winter crept into the city like it was trying not to be noticed. The air turned sharp, the kind that stings your cheeks and makes your breath puff out in little clouds. Our apartment felt smaller somehow, not because of the space, but because of how much of it was filled with us now. Douglas and I had settled into this rhythm, coffee in the mornings, quiet evenings, stolen kisses in the kitchen when one of us was cooking. It wasn't perfect, but it was real, and that scared me as much as it thrilled me. The thing about falling for someone is you don't just fall for them. You fall for the life you're building together, the little moments that stack up until they're bigger than you ever expected. But you also fall into their shadows, the parts of them they don't talk about, the parts you don't even see until they're right in front of you. And that's where we were now, Douglas and I, navigating the shadows, trying to find our way to something solid. It started with small things. He'd get quiet sometimes. Not the comfortable kind of quiet, but the kind where you could tell his mind was somewhere else. I'd catch him staring out the window, his sketch pad untouched, his fingers tapping absently on the table. I didn't push, not at first. I figured he'd tell me when he was ready. But the silences grew longer, heavier, and I started to wonder if I'd done something wrong, if I'd pushed too hard or not hard enough. One night in early December, we were on the couch, a blanket draped over us, some old sci-fi movie flickering on the TV. I was half asleep, my head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on my arm. It was one of those moments where everything felt right, like the world outside didn't matter. But then he spoke, his voice so soft I almost missed it. "Nate," he said, "can I tell you something?" I lifted my head, blinking the sleep away. His face was serious, his eyes fixed on the ceiling like he couldn't look at me. My stomach twisted, a reflex from too many years of expecting the worst. "Yeah, of course, what's up?" He didn't answer right away. His hand stilled on my arm, and he took a deep breath, like he was bracing himself. I haven't been totally honest with you. About some stuff." I sat up, the blanket slipping off my shoulders. The room felt colder suddenly, the hum of the TV too loud. "What kind of stuff?" He rubbed his face, his curls falling into his eyes. It's not about us. Not directly. It's about me, my past." I waited, my heart thudding. I didn't know what I was expecting, some big confession, maybe, or a secret that would change everything. But I wasn't prepared for what he said next. "I was engaged," he said, his voice barely above a whisper, "a couple years ago, to a guy named Chris." I blinked, my brain scrambling to process. Engaged? Like, getting married engaged? He nodded, still not looking at me. "Yeah, we were together for 3 years, planned a whole life together. House, dog, the works. Works." I swallowed, my mouth dry. "What happened?" He let out a shaky laugh, but there was no humor in it. He left, said he wasn't ready, that he needed to find himself. Whatever that means. One day he was there, and the next he was gone. Packed his stuff while I was at work, and left a note on the fridge. A fucking note. "Nate." On the fridge. A fucking note. "Nate." On the fridge. I stared at him, trying to picture it. Douglas, with his quiet strength, his careful hands, coming home to an empty apartment and a piece of paper that broke his world. My chest ached, not just for him but for the part of me that hadn't known, hadn't seen the weight he was carrying. "Why didn't you tell me?" I asked, my voice softer than I meant it to be. He finally looked at me, his eyes raw, like he'd peeled back a layer he'd kept hidden. "I don't know. At first, it didn't seem to matter. You and me, we were just starting out. And then it started to feel like too much to bring up, like it would scare you off or make you think I'm still hung up on him." "Are you?" The question slipped out before I could stop it, and I hated myself for it, for the edge of fear in my voice. "No," he said, firm, his gaze locking onto mine. "I'm not. It took me a long time to get over him, but I am. I promise. It's hard to talk about. It's hard to let someone in again after that." I nodded, not sure what to say. Part of me wanted to be mad, to ask why he'd kept something this big from me. But another part understood. I'd kept my own walls up, hadn't I? I'd danced around my fears, my doubts, never quite letting him see how much he meant to me. How could I fault him for doing the same? "I'm glad you told me," I said finally, reaching for his hand. His fingers were cold, and I squeezed them, hoping he could feel what I couldn't put into words. "And I'm not going anywhere, okay?" He smiled, small and tired, but real. "Okay." Oh. We didn't talk more about it that night. We just sat there, the movie forgotten, his head on my shoulder now. But something shifted between us, like a door creaking open just a little wider, not enough to flood the room with light, but enough to let us see each other a bit clearer. The next few weeks were complicated, not bad, but layered. Douglas was more open, not just about Chris, but about other things. His family, his fears, the dreams he'd tucked away because life got in the way. He told me about his mom, who'd raised him alone after his dad split, and how she'd call him every Sunday to check in. He told me about the graphic novel he'd started in college but never finished, the pages still hidden in a box under his bed. And I listened, not just because I wanted to know him, but because I wanted him to know I was here, really here. But opening up went both ways, and that was harder for me. I wasn't used to letting people see the messy parts, the way I'd always felt like I was one step behind everyone else, the way my dad's disappointment still stung even though I hadn't seen him in years. Douglas didn't push, but he'd ask these quiet questions, like, "What's something you've always wanted to do but never did?" Or, "What makes you happy, Nate? Like, really happy?" and I'd fumble through answers, feeling exposed but also lighter, like I was shedding weight I hadn't known I was carrying. One evening, we were at a bar with some of his friends, a cozy place with exposed brick walls and a jukebox that played too much Springsteen. His friends were cool, artsy types, loud and funny, the kind of people who made you feel included even if you didn't know their inside jokes. I was nervous at first, worried I'd stick out, the marketing guy among the creatives, but Douglas kept his hand on my knee under the table, a steady anchor, and I relaxed, laughing at their stories, trading jabs about bad movies. At one point, his friend Mia, a photographer with a pixie cut and a wicked grin, leaned across the table. "So, Nate," she said, "how'd you manage to snag this one?" She jerked her thumb at Douglas, who rolled his eyes but smiled. I laughed, my face warming. I don't know, just got lucky, I guess." Douglas squeezed my knee, his eyes meeting mine. "Nah," he said softly, "I'm the lucky one." The table erupted in mock groans and teasing, but I couldn't look away from him. My heart was pounding, not from the noise or the beer, but from the way he said it, like he meant every word. For the first time, I let myself believe it might be true. Later, walking home, our breath fogging in the cold, I took his hand. The streets were quiet, just the crunch of our boots on the sidewalk and the distant hum of traffic. I didn't say anything for a while, just let the moment settle, let the warmth of his hand ground me. I didn't say anything for a while, just let the moment settle, let the warmth of his hand ground me. "Thanks for tonight," I said finally, glancing at him. "Your friends are great." He smiled, his curls peeking out from under his beanie. "They like you. Mia's already planning to rope you into her next gallery show." I laughed, but it faded quickly. There was something I needed to say, something that had been building for weeks. "Douglas, I'm sorry I've been so weird sometimes. About us. I've never felt like this before, and it freaks me out." He stopped walking, turning to face me. The streetlight caught his eyes, making them glow like amber. "You don't have to apologize for that. I get it. This is scary for me too." "Really?" I asked, my voice small. "You always seem so together." He laughed, a soft, rough sound. "I'm faking it half the time, Nate. But you make it easier. You make me want to try." I stepped closer, my hands finding his waist, the cold air forgotten. "I want to try too. I want this, with you." He didn't say anything, just pulled me into a kiss, his lips warm against mine. It wasn't desperate or rushed, it was steady, like a promise. And for the first time, I felt like I could trust it, trust him, trust myself. Christmas came, and with it, a kind of quiet joy I hadn't expected. We didn't do anything big, no fancy gifts or trips, just a small tree in the corner of the living room, strung with mismatched lights, and a lazy day of cooking pancakes and watching cheesy holiday movies. Douglas gave me a sketch he'd done of us, sitting on the couch, my head on his shoulder. It was simple, just pencil and paper, but it felt like he'd given me a piece of his heart. I gave him a leather-bound notebook, the kind he'd always admired but never bought for himself. I'd written something inside the cover, just a few words, "For your stories, and ours." He read it, his eyes shining, and pulled me into a hug so tight I could barely breathe. That night, lying in his bed, the city quiet outside, I realized something. I wasn't afraid anymore. Not of losing him, not of messing up, not of the shadows we both carried, because we were here, together, and that was enough. More than enough. The new year brought changes, small but significant. Douglas started working on his graphic novel again, pulling out those old pages and adding new ones. I'd watch him sketch, his brow furrowed, his hands moving like they knew exactly what to do. Sometimes he'd show me, shy but proud, and I'd tell him how good it was, how much I believed in him. I started opening up more too, not just to him but to myself. I took a painting class, something I'd always wanted to try but never had the guts for. I was terrible at it. But Douglas would hang my lopsided landscapes on the fridge, grinning like they were masterpieces. And maybe they were, in their own way, not for what they looked like, but for what they meant. One spring evening, we were on the roof of our building, a bottle of wine between us. The city spread out like a map of stars. The air was warm, smelling of blooming trees and exhaust, and Douglas was leaning against the railing, his shirt unbuttoned just enough to show the curve of his collarbone. I watched him, my heart full, and realized I didn't need to ask what we were anymore. I knew. "I love you," I said, the words slipping out like they'd been waiting all along. He turned, his eyes wide, then soft. He set his glass down and crossed the roof in 2 steps, pulling me into his arms. "I love you too," he whispered, his voice rough with emotion. We stood there, holding each other, the city humming below us. It wasn't a fairy tale, not some perfect ending. We still had our shadows, our fears, our pasts. But we also had this, a quiet understanding, a love that didn't need to be loud to be real, and that was more than I'd ever dreamed of.